Following the great catastrophe that had befallen the Skaven race, their once mighty city was laid low as crumbling masonry littered the streets with rock and debris. But even this dreadful event had not expelled the world of the Skaven threat, for from underneath the ruins, small pockets of survivors began to claw their way out. As they emerged, all they saw was destruction. No building stood undamaged, all was in ruins except for the great bell tower that loomed over the great city. A seething mass of these survivors crowded around the great temple doors as they begged their god for guidance in this time of woe. But none dared to enter, lest they incur his holy wrath. Even as the Skaven began to squabble and fight at the temple's footsteps, the great chapel door swung open, and 12 figures emerged, eerily backlit by an ominous light shining within the temple. The 12 grey-clad rat lords spoke with one voice to the assembled multitude.
Now, the time has come for the children of the horned rat to spread across the world, to multiply in the dark places. Together, strength!
The great horned rat had whispered his plan, and it was the Lords of Decay, as they named themselves, who were to lead them. With the Skaven hordes finally united under the guidance of their god, the hordes began to burrow once more into the caverns of the dead sorcerers. Upon their entrance, they found that the sorcerers had indeed succeeded in their ritual. Great cracks within the earth had created long passages that connected the city of Skavenblight to a massive highway of tunnels beneath the spine of the World's Edge mountain. The surviving Skaven had heeded their god's will, and the hordes began to divide into 12 armies, each led by one of the Lords of Decay. Like a cancer, eating at the world, the Skaven spread far and wide amongst the tunnels and caverns that their sorcerers had provided them. Within mere months, the Skaven had already began numerous raids and assaults against dwarven mines and settlements along the spine of the World's Edge mountain, and from this, the glorious Under-Empire had been brought to reality. Over the next few hundred years, the Skaven became a widespread race, with clans spreading into nearly all the corners of the world. But each clan, no matter how far and wide, will always consider Skavenblight to be the one true capital of their race, with operatives and diplomats making constant contact with their home city. During this time, rumours began to spread across the Underway about a massive hoard of warpstone deposits located within the southern reaches of the World's Edge mountain. The mountain in question, known as Cripple Peak, has within its roots a mother lode of dangerous minerals embedded deep within its sundered core. With so much warpstone to be gained from this mountain, the Skaven clans launched multiple expeditions towards the mountain in hope of claiming its rich mineral deposit for themselves. However, as the Skaven began to encroach upon the tunnels beneath the mountain, reports from scouts and trading parties bore news that the upper reaches of the mountain were occupied by a great horde of undead warriors, led by the ancient Nehekaran necromancer Nagash, and the mountain he currently claimed was the great fortress of Nagashizar. Initially, each Skaven clan greedily attacked Nagashizar separately, and they tried to be the first to grab riches of the mountain for themselves. But the formidable fortress was not so easily overtaken, and the Skaven hordes were pushed out of the mountain time and time again. As this grueling war of attrition between the two factions began to stretch well into the decades, this series of invasions and military engagements became known by the Skaven as the War of Cripple Peak. It's not surprising that this became such an elongated war of attrition. By the shores of the Sour Sea, surrounded by the glittering desert of the desolation of Nagash, is Nagashizar. It's known as the Cursed Pit, and it's the mightiest fortress that the old world has ever seen. Built by the tireless labour of countless undead things, the castle rises nearly half a mile above the desert. It was excavated from the living rock of Cripple Peak, and the mountain top is its highest spire. Hundreds of other great towers bristle from the mountainside, and by night terrible green witch-lights burn in their windows. Nagash is a fortified mountain, pierced by countless leagues of corridors. Within thousands of chambers, hundreds of undead things wait ready to answer their lord's every command. 4 mighty gates guard the approaches to Nagash, each watched over by mighty war machines of the most dangerous type. Animated golems of bone and bolt throwers, catapults that throw screaming skulls and worse. The gates themselves are made from some nameless black metal which shines like burning obsidian and is 10 times harder than steel. The pits beneath Nagash extend down almost twice the height of the mountain, forming a huge honeycomb of galleries and mines that had to be fought through one room at a time. With so much warpstone to be gained in this expedition, and lacking any unifying guidance to coordinate their attacks, the newly formed Council of 13 had to step in and take command. Under their ruthless tyranny, the Council directed the numerous clans into a single unified force, coordinating massive assaults by using the numerous tunnel networks to infiltrate the mountain from below. So it was that not one clan but many hordes burst into the fortress of Nagash, seeking to overrun it from below, as they had done so many times to dwarfen holds. But the undead forces of Nagash were limitless. Thousands upon thousands of warriors would rise up against the assailants that would dare to defile their master's home, and those that were defeated in battle only rose up to further bolster their numbers. Savage tunnel fighting lasted for months beneath the mountain. Unable to wear down such a powerful foe, the Skaven were forced into a stalemate. In an effort to bolster the Skaven war effort, the Council employed the services of Clan Skryre and their warlock engineers to break the deadlock, bringing with them a whole arsenal of powerful war machines. However, Nagash had anticipated this, and with his astounding power, he exerted his will upon their machines, and the crude constructs briefly flickered and then died. Desperate to achieve a victory in the fortress, the Skaven horde struck the lands above, besieging the settlements of Nagash's human followers. Whole cities burned, and the Skaven looked as if they would be able to crush their foes from the surface. However, the human followers fear Nagash far more than the Ratmen, and with this fear the humans fought desperately against their assault. With their assault faltering, the war dragged on for more than a century. It was finally after nearly 100 years of stalemate that the Council realized that they could not win this war, and the expedition was costing far too many resources to continue any further. However, just as all hope seemed lost, an odd turn of events began to unfold that turned to the Skaven favour. The Council received an envoy from Nagash, proposing an end to the hostilities and a pact of cooperation. The terms of the pact were that in exchange for the Skaven's aid, Nagash would supply the Ratmen with huge quantities of warpstone mined beneath Cripple Peak. Though the Skaven's greed desired the entire warpstone deposit for themselves alone, the Skaven armies could not fight another century-long stalemate, forcing the Horde and the Council to begrudgingly agree. After claw-marking the pact, the Council of 13 ordered all Skaven forces to maintain a diplomatic distance while they attempted more stealthy methods to usurp the coveted resources. Most efforts failed, but reconnaissance reports of other significant sources of warpstone were being discovered around the peaks. When Nagash sent more emissaries in order to offer the Council more warpstone in exchange for luring orc tribes into the cursed pit, the Council redoubled their spying efforts to find out what Nagash was planning. At first their spies could learn little, save that the growing armies of the Necromancer set sail to the Sour Sea in ships of bone. Upon their return, observers reported that the ships bore only a single prisoner, a human king of some southern realm. Then something began which the council needed no spies to report. A great gathering of terrible dark energy being felt over Cripple Peak. Mounting storm clouds of dark power herald a mighty spell intended to reshape the entire world to its foundations. Nightmares stalked the surface world, and portents of doom were abounded. The Grey Seers were struck by the vision of the imminent future, and dark omens racked their feeble and frail minds. Fearful of the coming doom, the Council of 13 hurriedly gathered within the walls of Skavenblight. Using every single asset available to them, the now unified council scurried far and wide for clues to Nagash's intention. To their horror, far to the south, they found their answer flowing like a dusty river of bone. A massive horde, probably the largest army ever known in history, with literally millions upon millions of restless undead warriors going on the war march, answering the summoning call of Nagash's arm. It was already the mightiest army the world had ever seen, and more of the foul undead were already rising all across the world to join the growing legions. Before such an army, no foe in the known world would be able to stand, not even the numerous hordes of the Under-Empire. Terror gripped the council, for the Skaven lords knew that the Under-Empire would be the first to be besieged by this massive force. Their network of spies, observers, and lookouts had relayed information that all was silent in Nagashazar, as the great necromancer was forced into a trance after his undertaking of the great ritual. The entire council realized that Nagash must be destroyed, or else the necromancer would reign forever as Lord of the Dead. But none in the council knew how to undermine such a powerful entity as Nagash, and the council argued over their course of action. No Skaven in the Under-Empire had the courage or the skill to face such a foe, and so the council needed to look for another more willing champion. The salvation of the council, and indeed the entire known world, lay deep within the dungeons of Nagashazar itself. The human king, the ruler of a long-gone kingdom, laid broken, but his will was still strong, and dire vengeance burned within his searing heart. The council acted quickly, knowing that the human needed a weapon so mighty that it would ensure the death of the Lord of the Dead. It mattered not whether the king should die, for he knew that his own life was fading, and he would ensure that the world would not suffer the same fate as his people had. All of the council members agreed, and so they began the creation of the dreaded weapon. With utmost urgency, the council forged a blade made of the purest warpstone ever gathered from Cripple Peak. The Grey Seers all wove mighty spells and curses of doom upon the molten metal, whilst the warlock engineers of Clan Scryer inscribed dire runes so deadly that to read them would mean death to the beholder. The final attachment to this mighty weapon was a device embedded within the hilt of the sword, which allowed the council to watch and channel their powers into the human being. Before the blade cooled, it was sheathed within a large lead casket and was rushed towards Cripple Peak to stop Nagash before it was too late. Using secret tunnels to gain access to Nagashazar, a lone hooded Skaven crept within the dungeon. Silently, he freed the king and opened the lead casket before fleeing into darkness. The king grasped the sword, and with unholy power, the council guided the king towards the throne room. As the king entered the room, he saw Nagash, sitting alone in his throne and at his weakest. With the dust clouds of the undead horde coming nearer within the hour, the human king knew that he needed to end it all now. With faltering steps, the king approached, hesitating before the towering figure of Nagash. Aided by the council's mental urging, the king finally struck. At the last moment, the necromancer raised a claw to ward off the blow. The fell blade was far too powerful to ward, and clove through Nagash's spell, cleanly cutting the necromancer's upraised fist. In retaliation, the great necromancer snapped out of his stupor to unleash a deadly blast at the king. The council reeled as they channeled more and more energy to protect their pawn from harm. 2 ancient rat lords lay smouldering as they died deflecting such a titanic blow. It was an epic struggle to behold as the king of the living and the lord of the dead fought for dominance over the mortal world. With his last ounce of strength, the king once more drove on and struck the necromancer's decaying body. The king went mad with vengeance, hacking at Nagash with every bit of strength he still possessed, until at last his sword's deadly enchantments took hold. Soon the fell blade penetrated through the iron-hard, magically enhanced bones of the necromancer, until finally it laid shattered in 1,000 pieces. With his death, the world had been saved from a grim and silent end. The council saw their champion stagger away as the king looked across his once beautiful land. His land and his people were no more, and the king wept at the sight, despair washing over the fire within his heart. The king walked aimlessly back to the kingdom he once ruled, with the fell blade taking more and more of his life and soul away, until he finally fell upon the river Mortis. There, the king died, and the legendary hero's body was never seen again. The Skaven overran the fortress following Nagash's defeat, where the entire council personally oversaw the complete destruction of Nagash's remains as the Skaven cast his bones into a smouldering warp forge, destroying him utterly. Unbeknownst to the rest of the world, the threat to all life was averted, and the most powerful necromancer the world had ever seen was slain by the treachery of the Skaven. The Council of 13, in upheaval after the loss of its seer lord, ordered Clan Rikek to proceed with mining operations on Cripple Peak whilst the council oversaw their works. The clan leader, Warlord Grask, became an aspiring member of the Council of 13 and quickly established himself a permanent seat within the council chamber. The clan crushed what was left of Nagash's empire, including the enslavement of the humans under his former reign. Using both Skaven and human slaves, the clan excavated never-before-seen amounts of warpstone out of Cripple Peak and transported the minerals back to Skavenblight. With this much wealth, Clan Rikek naturally grew in power and promptly renamed the fortress as Fortress Rikek.